And for those of you still piling in, we're waiting another couple of seconds. We'll let a few stragglers join on, and I think we'll get started just about now. We're 2 minutes after actually, so I think this is good. I think we can jump in. I know we got a lot of great content to cover today, and hopefully some good Q&A as well. So let's jump into things. First off, good afternoon, everybody. We appreciate you taking the time out of your day to join us today. As most of you know, SentinelOne was brought onto the Sherweb line card back in January. Very, very highly anticipated partnership that we were really, really excited about, still are. For those of you who are already partners of Sherweb, maybe SentinelOne as well, I know that was a high anticipation as well on your end, right? So again, we're looking forward to continuing these conversations and these value adds. For today's webinar, we've got a pretty special lineup, and the goal of today is really to have some conversation and generate some value topics, right? And kind of hopefully get the mind open to some different ways of thinking and navigating the cybersecurity landscape, right? There's a lot of changes with AI and different types of technologies, and what are we using these solutions for? And so we've got some special conversation topics today. I'm going to jump right in and give a little bit of an introduction for our main panelists and sound wisdom hosts here. And we'll go over a little bit of housekeeping agenda items, and we'll get off and running. So first and foremost, for those of you who I have not worked with, my name is Matthew Bient. I am our product sales manager here at Sherweb for our security portfolio. SentinelOne, again, was very, very exciting for myself as well. We've been having lots of conversations since the launch, prior to the launch with our partners, and hoping that today can give you some additional insight on what this looks like as a holistic view and what the cybersecurity world looks like with SentinelOne for the existing partners, but also generate some interest if you're not using the product right now and you're just exploring this world, right? What is EDR? What is XDR? What does it mean for an MSP? So first off, let me do a quick introduction. We've got Roddy Bergeron joining us today. He is. Yep. How do we describe you, Roddy?
You can't describe it. There's no words
right.
into the universe that can describe me, right?
That's right.
No, I can self. You want me to self-introduce myself? I could talk about some of the stuff I've done over the years. But no, my name's Roddy Bergeron. I am the cybersecurity technical fellow or technical expert at Sherweb. My goal is to help MSPs explore the cybersecurity space and build their cybersecurity practice from like a holistic approach. In the past, I've done government auditing, hospital audits, bank audits, all kind of fun stuff. The life of an auditor is extremely enthusiastic and extremely it's one of those jobs where you don't find yourself in. Then I helped do some privatizations with the state of Louisiana and Department of Health and Hospitals, helping transition some facilities and do some facility turnaround. And then got into the MSP space, helped build an MSP out, built their managed service division, did some automation with them, built their cybersecurity platform, their vCISO services, their compliance as a service platforms. And then after 8-9 years of doing that, moved over to the dark side and became a part of the vendor space and I've worked my way into Sherweb, right? And that's it, And as I like to say too, like you don't have to listen to everything I say. I am an elected official in the state of Louisiana, so the dreaded P word gets thrown around, politician. So you'll notice sometimes that the politician in me comes out. But hopefully today we stay on track about cybersecurity and help you guys understand a little bit about the threat landscape out there and a little bit about how AI plays into that, right?
Yeah, and Roddy's been with us,
since
5
January.
months now?
Yeah, since me and SentinelOne onboarded at the same. We onboarded at the same time. What a coincidence,
Strategic, right there. That's right. Well, we are very happy to utilize Roddy and his wisdom every day here at Sherweb. And then also joining us today, we're really excited. We've got Chris Boehm, who is a field CISO on the SentinelOne team. I know Chris has a lot of background, Microsoft Azure as well, been in this field for quite some time. So again, I won't steal your thunder, Chris. I'll let you do some introductions for yourself and tell the folks what we got today.
Well, I appreciate the kind introduction and having me here on this webinar. Just a quick background about myself. I started in state and local government. I worked for a school district, one guy who reported to one guy, and it was me. And I don't know, it was like 7,000 machines, it felt like at that time. And then I got into the enterprise space. I was, again, one person to one executive saying, hey, you have to handle everything. And that's call centers to data colos to infrastructure to vendor management to the list goes on and on. And then I got interviewed to work at Microsoft. So I started working at Microsoft. And my career at Microsoft is not an exciting one. It was actually on probably the scariest one I ever thought about joining in on. And it was on like blue screens of death. So I had to understand why the kernel operating system was crashing, tell the customer what was happening. I started on the support scale and then quickly joined on the engineering side on a launch of cybersecurity products. And the first one was information protection with Active Directory rights management services, whole mouthful. But I did it more on the government side. And then I started working on multiple different products on the Azure side. And my first Azure launch product was Microsoft Sentinel or Azure Sentinel at that time. Years later, I've now joined SentinelOne, and that's been about 2.5 years now at SentinelOne. And I am the field CISO here at SentinelOne. And what that means is I pretty much do a little of everything: engineering, marketing, sales, internal operations, merger and acquisitions. The list is kind of wide. The only thing I say is I don't do any HR regulations at this company, and I never help out HR orgs. So I pretty much do a little of everything.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, to sum all of that up, I think for all of our attendees, what that means is between these two gentlemen, we've got a lot of sound wisdom, a lot of good stories. They've experienced a lot of the MSP space, the channel, the cybersecurity landscape. So that's why we're really excited to have these two on webinar today to hopefully really provide some holistic insight and any type of value that you joining us today can pull from this. That's a success for us, right? There's a lot of new topics that we're going to be covering. So Roddy and Chris are going to jump into a few items today. They're going to talk about the threat landscape. They're going to talk a little bit about AI with threat hunting, right? How is that evolving? What does that look like, right? What are some real stories and some real situations? So hopefully those of you that are joining today, again, maybe you can relate. Maybe it's something that you're looking to explore. This isn't going to be a salesy webinar throwing stuff at you, right? We absolutely will have some information at the end where those of you, if you do want to learn some more information, you can reach out to our teams and we can jump on calls. Absolutely. But again, today's really focused on providing some value, right? Like I said, these are our cybersecurity fellas, so they've got a lot of great information. So I'm gonna pop off. I'm gonna let you two gentlemen do your thing. For those of you on the call, we do have some poll questions. Myself, as well as Jeff Fox, sales manager on the SentinelOne side, are going to be here. We're able to answer questions throughout as well in the chat. So again, we'll be around, but let's go ahead and let's jump into things. I know you guys have a lot to chat about, so
yeah, for
appreciate
sure.
you guys being here.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. Appreciate the introduction. Look, Chris, I think we should start off with a poll question, right? Let's tailor our conversation to what the audience wants to see a little bit. So the first question is going to pop up, and we're going to ask, in the past year, right, has your organization or one of your clients, have they experienced any kind of cyber attack? All right, so like that could be anything, Chris, like business email compromises, full-on ransomware, data exfiltration. Like what else would fall under like a cyber attack, right?
I mean, it could be proprietary information collection, like as you brought up, ransomware. It could be just infiltration of information when it comes to what an organization is using, not actually an attack, but just a collective information. I've been seeing it really a lot recently on the healthcare side, like any innovation is being targeted by certain sectors, or on the educational side, the professors are having a harder challenge of even doing certain tasks just because of the fact that they can't, because information that they're investigating and researching is being locked down due to compromise of information or research. So And that could be databases, and the list goes on and on. So I've seen a lot of attacks, but it almost always comes down to money in the end. Well, I mean, how are they going to impact money? And is it the return of money or massive attack to infrastructure around what they're looking at? So
yeah, always financially driven, right? Like the amount of
almost always
organized crime that profits from extortion and other malicious activities, right? Like, and that's not even talking about like availability attacks, right? Like we start talking about DDoS and website takedowns and everything else, right? They don't always have to be what we consider like traditional attacks, right? Like I remember like we had our MSP, we had a colo facility, right? And like one day we were like, man, why is the data center connection running so slow? We had like a low level DDoS attack from like a Russian IP address. So we like black holed all that stuff and everything. But like that's a realization too. Like how do you prepare yourself for those types of attacks, right? Like the ones that take away your ability to work, like availability attacks.
I mean, it makes it's really being prepared from what, at least from my expertise. Like, do you have redundancies? Do you have the capability of shifting the traffic around, at least in that scenario? Or do you have backups that could recover yourself in event of something occurring? Or do you have the appropriate response capabilities to prevent something, like attack the attacker, so to speak? That's why some DDoS cloud workloads are becoming so popular, is because I think I even read an article, it's probably a year or so now. Google said they had the biggest attack ever on DDoS, and they were able to prevent it. And stuff like that is incredible, but it is an expensive resource that not all small companies can leverage, unfortunately, because they usually put a pretty hefty price tag just to get into that bucket. So.
Yeah, and I've even heard of instances of like where if you're doing like an attack back, right, but they're spoofing their IP address, you accidentally attack an innocent bystander, right? Like, it was a reflection attack. I'm trying to remember the name of it or whatever, right? Like, you know, it's interesting to start reading. We start digging in and reading all of the incidents, right? Like, I have a Feedly account, and like I'm constantly digging in and reading about all the different incidents that happen and all the ones that make the news. And man, there's always something new out there. There's always something interesting to hear what's going on out in the real world, for sure. Like our poll look, we're about split, right? Like 55% says they have experienced an attack in the last year, their clients have, and 45% said no. So man, some people are lucky. I think
yes, I would agree.
At our MSP days, like I felt like we were dealing with a major attack like once a month or something like that, from ransomware to availability takedowns, things like that. So interesting. And I'm gonna pop another poll question in right now to help start our conversation. Like, what is your biggest concern regarding the threat landscape out there? Like, Chris, what are y'all seeing?
I think it depends on who I'm talking to. Heck, the one concern is about quantum computing engineering attacks with Gen AI, and you're like, okay, deepfakes and social engineering is huge. I've been hearing that probably the most recently because of the recent political events that are going on around the world. Supply chain attacks have never gone away. It's actually, I've done multiple write-ups on it. It's fascinating to learn, and it's scary because you just don't know when it's going to happen, which kind of reflects onto the 0 day as well. So a lot of these are consistent. I would say insider threats could be perceived as potentially always the person is usually the weakest. It's not the technology, it's the people at organizations. So how do you prevent something like that? Even the recent attacks, probably the biggest one I dealt with last year was just because of an engineer. Even with multi-factor authentication and having all the right appropriate things, they still let the attacker inside their environment, and they allow the attacker to get into their cybersecurity tools by authorizing multi-factor authentication through the whole entire process. And it's just because they were just getting pinged over and over and over, and they're like, whatever, just accept, I'm done with this. So
and that's a part of it that like it kind of fascinates me, right? When we talk about insider threats, we tend to think malicious, but there's non-malicious insider threats too, like putting confidential files on a USB drive and taking it at home, and that potentially causing a compromise, or like not locking your screen when you walk away. If you have your screen in a public area and you don't lock it, you walk away to go use the restroom or grab something to drink or something like that, and someone gets access to your laptop or your information, right? So like, is that a concern? How do you prevent a non-malicious person from or putting your organization at risk, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's multiple layers of concern. When I was working at Microsoft, I was part of their Cyber Defense Operations Centers team, and that Cyber Defense Operations, the CDOC is what it stood for. And one of the things that I was privy to is I got to see all the notifications of any kind of attack on a where they're hosting their cloud infrastructure. But this could be literally a car driving by too close to a pole or someone touching a door. So their attack level is very different because of the impact of their customers and the scope. Like they took it to their policy regulations extremely high. Some other companies may not care as much. Like if someone did get into the door, okay, what are they going to do? Maybe take some free coffee, and then they'd have to still have their authorization. So it's like, what happens if someone got in? What could you do? And how secure? Like, what would your business be down? And that's usually what I would ask a customer is saying, well, if this happened and you lost like all operations of business, for example, you are in a bank and all of a sudden your main database is not running to process transactions, that sounds like you've lost business, and that's millions to billions depending on the operation. I would put much more higher risk on that and much more security regulations. But yes, unfortunately, some things cannot be prevented. If it's like an email that I'm sending back and forth to my boss, if it got leaked, it does suck. It is my own proprietary information, but I'm not too concerned about it unless it's something that is proprietary. So that's my own policies and regulations that I put into place.
Yeah, and the poll results came in by a landslide. Deep fakes and social engineering, right? Like if you read the like Verizon just put out their data breach incident report, right? And like the number one thing in there is still the same thing we say every year, which is social engineering attacks, phishing and credential compromise and those types of attacks. Like they're not these. I always tell people, like when we talk about hacking, sometimes the misnomer from media, especially movies and TV shows, is it's like hacking is this complex sometimes, and it can be, right? Like I've seen some 0 days that are pretty. You got to go through a pretty serious attack chain to get the end results, right? But for the most part, it's social engineering. I'm trying to steal your credentials and get the access that you would, right? So what are you seeing out there with regards to deepfakes and social engineering attacks?
Well, deepfakes are, I've even tested some of the tools. It's impressive. I've even shown pictures to family members and saying which one is me and which one's not me, and they can't tell the difference. It's incredible what generative AI is doing with AI technology. Before we even started this call, we talked about our pictures, and I said, if you just submit 40 pictures of myself, it'll generate a profile picture for me that's perfect because of the generative AI aspects of it. But with social engineering, I mean, my first attack I ever ran into was a social engineering. Like it wasn't impacted to me, but it was an infrastructure managed by me. And we lost hundreds of thousands of dollars because the scenario was they sent an email from the CEO and the only variation was the domain name. And it was such a small difference. You just want to see a Y and an E switch. Like it's so minor. And they said, hey, this client has been waiting and this is what's happening. Can you send it over? It looked legitimate. And the account team said, yeah, I'll transfer the money. I'll take care of it. No problem. And all of a sudden they lost $200,000 and spent months with cyber insurance and the FBI to do a federal investigation because the money was already picked up within 2 hours of that transfer. So that was my first cybersecurity. And it always seems to be social engineering that gets in, not the security practices that we had in place, but the fact that they bypass the human element, unfortunately. And the human element is incredibly important when it comes to just the grand scheme of social, preventing social engineering.
Yeah, we look at the like MGM last year, right? Like that was like that whole takedown was a result of them phishing their help desk, right? Like that's that's something that we worried about a lot on the MSP side, right? Like if someone calls in and says, hey, like I have a new user starting, I need you to set them up right now. How do we know the person on the other end is who they say they are, right? Now, if you have at the time, if you had a good customer relationship, you knew who that person was, the way they spoke, that you could hear them on the phone. But like nowadays, that's not a good reason. So like how do you prove the person on the other side of the phone or the person sending you the email is the real person, right?
That's hard. I mean, that's where certain tools like UEBA started popping up years ago. AI has been part of the cybersecurity space for quite some time. Like SentinelOne has been doing it for 10 years. UEBA started popping up to kind of help with the possibility of abnormal behavior. I'm not saying I'm the biggest fan of the technology. There's so much advancements that could be done. It's a very cost-heavy solution because you're constantly crunching and trying to come up with anomalies and say this is a potential possibility. But when it gets down to deepfakes or social engineering, it's still hard. So you have to almost cause this. That's why zero trust is becoming so popular right now. That terminology is you have to add those layers and assume a breach. Like you're going to assume, why do I need to get in and not why do I have to keep re-authenticating? It just makes it harder and harder based on that because you're just assuming the attacker is already in here at all times, pretty much.
Yeah. And limiting I always use this term like blast radius. So when someone does get compromised, like how do we limit the impact it has? So my favorite one is like least privilege access. So why do we give like how come when someone starts at a client, we give them permission to all the files when they don't need access to it? And this is compounded with AI, like when we're talking about data governance and things like Copilot and everything else, like the importance of data governance in limiting a compromise, right? Like ensuring that you have these sealed compartments, as it would if I go back to my Dale Carnegie training, like live life in sealed compartments or daily. Like how do you seal a compartment so that that the damage being done isn't as bad, right? Like I think that's part of it.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, awesome. So when we start talking more about AI, like how do you detect, right, that it's AI when it's so easy to fool, or so easy to recreate someone's voice or image or actions or mannerisms? So how do you detect it?
I would say personally right now, like I use ChatGPT, Gemini. I use most of the generative AI technologies out there, and I am familiar with some ML and AI models myself because of my personal experience. There is some things you can detect, like patterns, and you can almost see like, wow, this email is definitely written by AI. It's like too clean. It has certain commas in certain spots. Like it just like clicks in my head like this is AI driven. That's okay. I mean, you can use AI to clean up your emails.
There's a lot of bullet lists, a lot of I find that a lot of times, like when I'm generating content, it'll be like, hey, here's the things. It's like bullet list stuff. So you can kind of start to see. I know when people post on LinkedIn. When someone posts on LinkedIn and it's AI generated, you can almost kind of tell, right? Like it follows a certain cadence, a certain rhythm. It's hard to say exactly what it is, but like you get a sense that it's
correct.
That it's a
correct.
Yeah. I think
the average person may not know that. Or let's say like we're not native English speakers, for example, and you have a support team that maybe speaks 3 languages, and you're like, well, this looks close enough, or this looks right. So it starts blending depending on your interpretation of the information. I would say it can get hard, and you can even tell AI to make it sound different. So you can say like, hey, don't sound like a chatbot, and remove the bullet points, and make it sound like I'm a 5-year-old writing this, and it will completely try writing at the best of its ability to that scale for you. I mean, you can twist it up however you want. Although there is some behaviors that you can detect. The problem is for example, we can talk about like the threat landscape and how things are happening. Like relatively recently, we've been seeing here at SentinelOne generative AI attacks, and how they're doing that. For example, is instead of just saying here's a malicious payload and they stagger it throughout your environment and then they deploy it all at once, like ransomware or however you want to do it, they're saying, hey, we are going to do a pen test attack. So they're constantly trying to figure out what's happening in your environment, what's allowed, instead of just like searching through and getting it, and then building malicious malware that spreads very quickly based on that pen test. And it's using generative AI. It's all real things. So it doesn't look malicious. It's just like, hey, can I access this? Can I access the following? Can I do the following? And then it'll do a payload improvement, so to speak, and then do an attack that's targeted for your environment. So it makes it a little bit harder. It's still similar malware. It can be detected. It's malicious. It does certain actions, but it does make it harder for some organizations to say like, oh, this is the common hash, or this is the common model, or this is the common thing that's happening, because they can actually make it completely different for each organization potentially. This is not huge, but that's where things are potentially going with generative AI influencing the malware development.
So you're talking about like a custom attack chain depending on the environment, not following a playbook, like a traditional playbook, which we do X, Y, Z, but more customizing that. Like that's interesting, because that's how a lot of threat hunting works, right? You have a playbook, you know what the attacks are, and when you start to see those precursors, or you start to see that chain of attacks, you sound the alarm and say, let's stop the damage, right? So how do you? I guess the question I'm asking is like, so how do you detect that? Like, how do you figure that out? You know,
that's a good question. Sometimes you have to detect what's you don't know. Like even for example, when the major SolarWinds attack happened, I mean this attack changed the government. They started putting policies and regulations in place. nobody at SentinelOne was compromised. But at the same time, it's not like we knew exactly what was going to happen. Our ML AI capabilities, our behavioral learning patterns and anomaly detections built into the agent detected it and blocked it. We didn't know what it was. We just knew it was wrong, so to speak. So there is this like layer of encryption. You could say like, it shouldn't do this. It shouldn't be manipulating, nor should it like lock down or make things harder. And that's the scale of why AI is fighting AI. You almost have to combat it like the possibility of the unknown. It could be even like, for example, imagine, I'm not saying we're doing this at this moment in time, but imagine, for example, generative AI gets embedded into the operating system, which it just now has been announced, and they're selling. Microsoft just announced Copilot Surface Books. I just saw that recently. You're like, okay, well, what if they took it to the next level and they said, hey, let's add in generative AI capabilities of determining you are you. So it's learning the pattern of you and building a profile of you constantly. And then you can determine, wait a minute, almost every time you get in the machine, you open up Edge, you go to this website, and it's all proprietary, it's locked down, encrypted, it's all there. Microsoft doesn't collect any of it, but it learns you and adapts you and makes your life a little easier. So when you pop up your computer, it has it. Well, then what if you could say the anomaly occurred that this doesn't look like you, and it just automatically kicks you out of the operating system? That's something that would be pretty cool to determine, like, this is not you based on behavior analysis. But you can have a bad day. Like, how can it determine that? Like, you might just change your pattern, or you got tired of whatever you're doing. So there's different scopes and capabilities that I would say security can go, but that's just like the beginning stages. Like, you almost have to be consistently growing, and that's where generative AI is. Like, if you touched it years ago, it was not as mature as it was. You can literally ask it, help me build a payload and understand like how to do the following. It would just help you do it. And now they're tailoring it, the language model itself, to say like, that is not appropriate, or this is not where I want to go, or here's a snippet, but we're not going to give you the whole information for you. So they're trying to mature the model to make it more secure by design, I should say, in comparison to just being the Wild Wild West.
And I think that's kind of neat, because we, in the MSP space, right, we used to look at the enterprise and say like, man, they got all these great tools and these great resources, but a lot of those resources are starting to come down market, right? Like, a lot of those enterprise features we're starting to see come into the space, right? Like, I guess I'm asking, like, do you see that continuing to happen, that trend continuing to happen, where those more enterprise level softwares and access to AI is coming down market?
Yeah, I do. I mean, if you look at anything that's related like to venture capitalists and what they're investing into, if you don't have AI associated with your name, you're not really cool, or you're not really innovating at this moment in time. So, and if you see a new product popping up that's being supported by a bank of some sort, it has to have some type of AI, generative AI, or element to it, because you're just falling behind at this moment in time.
Yeah, and I think that pops up to our next poll question, right? Like, so what? So like so it should be popping up on screen soon. So what, like, AI generated or AI powered tools is our audience looking at, or what's the ones that they're looking forward most to using, right? So, what have you seen? What's the most interesting thing you've seen, Chris, in the last year come out that, like, hey, this is AI powered, and it's not just a sticker on a box that says, now with AI, right? But it was actually a useful, or I guess a useful way of using AI in the cybersecurity space.
Yeah, I'm going to leverage SentinelOne here. Like, there is multiple different layers. Like I mentioned UAVA earlier, but probably the most exciting one that I've been seeing is the leverage of generative AI for security professionals, and how we're doing that here at SentinelOne. There's Copilot, you brought that up earlier, for cybersecurity means, but we took it as like, hey, we want to offer full expertise in analysts, and we wanted to build an analyst AI, or a SOC as a service, but it's not really doing the whole experience as a SOC as a service, because it's not fully automated, connecting the dots and providing it for you. But what it's doing is allowing a security professional to go in there and say, hey, I'm trying to determine the following based on this large amount of data, and it gets results very quickly. So instead of you going in, and I'm sure a handful or most of people on this call has gone through at least one incident in their life, and collecting information, connecting the dots, understanding what happened, building a justification, explaining it to everybody else, and then having an executive level or board level discussion. Generative AI is now offering that, and that's what we're trying to do at SentinelOne. So, for example, you can figure out an incident. You can ask Purple to say, explain to me and provide, like, is there any analysis that is related to MITRE or anything that can connect the dots and justify and show the data with it? And can you rewrite it into a board level discussion to say, look what we found, look what we prevented, and this is what potentially was touched and looked at. Like it could do all that on the fly for you, which is incredible as a cybersecurity professional. But to push it one step further, this is where I think generative AI is going to really push us, is what can we do with that data next? Not just build out a report and tell us like what happened and where it is, but what if it automatically connected APIs and said, hey, we noticed this application is an odd behavior or it's insecure, and here's some ways you can mitigate it or make it better or notify. Like automation is going to start kicking in much more so, I think, with generative AI's input, and empowering security professionals to be a lot more quicker and faster to respond. Because right now, I mean, heck, dealing with 50 to 100 tools is hard, and generative AI is going to hopefully collect all that information, provide you a report, and you can re-justify it yourself and say, yeah, this is like 99% accurate. I validated it, went through it myself, but it told me where to look, and it made my life a lot easier versus just spending hours or weeks on an incident trying to figure out what's happening.
Yeah, no, that's that's part of the thing. It's like, what are we seeing like real world, like the MSPs using AI for? Like, what are you seeing out there?
Some of them have different approaches. If you want to talk about specifically generative AI, I would say it's almost all of them start with like a chat bot or some capability to improve. Usually on the support level is where I see it at first. They want to say, hey, send in information. I can answer some questions based on our own documentation. And we've done something similar ourselves. So it improved the performance of support. That's usually where a lot of organizations go first. And then what can I do about the product level itself? Some MSPs may incorporate it. I haven't seen that adoption too aggressively, but I have seen generative AI being talked about and starting to be adopted in their solutions, including incorporating our own for our MSPs. So you can technically leverage Purple AI into your own offering and say, hey, this is a service for you as a customer, or enabling you to provide a better service to your customers itself.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Like, and I always like to hear like the stories. So do you have any good stories from SentinelOne of like, someone deployed a Purple or some kind of AI threat hunting tool, and like it found something unique or something interesting or saved the day? Like I always like to hear those stories of like, we implemented this, it saved the day. So like, what stories do you have?
Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's actually one that Purple did solve and save the day. I think there is. I'm not sure I can share those, but usually the one that I would say I can share is the easiest example is just the speed of how fast and how accurate it is. And that's usually where everyone's like, wow, my top analyst who, does a great job, knows what they're doing. And then you give it to a more like amateur analyst. The amateur analyst was actually faster than the top analyst when they were leveraging Purple AI in comparison to the top analyst that was just researching through the tool, knew how to handle the tool, and was trying to get the exact same answers. And we've been doing that more and more recently, offering customers to get their hands on and test it and look at it. And that's probably the biggest thing I keep hearing over and over is just the profound like shock of how fast it is. And we've done this internally ourselves, like all SentinelOne employees, and you're just amazed, like the people who are using generative AI or people who are not, and how much faster the generative AI wins over a security professional who does it for a living, so to speak.
Yeah. And do you see this adoption of AI in like small businesses or like, because usually, we see it adopted in enterprise, medium business, those who have a strong security posture. Small businesses normally are a lot more, let's say, budget conscious, if we're gonna, let's just use that term, right? But are you seeing that adoption in the small business areas or small business world?
For a security generative AI, I would say not so much. All small businesses, as long as they're leveraging a modern solution, have been leveraging AI for quite some time. I've even been working with, I know people who just leverage Copilot. Heck, I use it for personal purposes and by personal business. Like you can technically do whatever you want with generative AI capabilities, and I can't say if they should not or should be using it. I would encourage it from a personal behavior or even small business, like helping you rewrite an email appropriately, or making sure you're connecting the dots and understanding what you're writing down, or from an incident management perspective, like is this a correlating, and ask it a simple question. No proprietary information, ideally, unless you have a sanctioned AI tool. So ideally, for example, like SentinelOne, we have to make sure that all the data is containerized to that organization, and then when you ask it a question, it stays in that bucket. Like we don't leverage that or share that across other customers. I would not say all public tools are that way. So just be conscious of what you're leveraging when you're looking at any AI solution. But yeah, I think everyone should be using AI in some form or fashion, or you're going to fall behind compared to your competitors who are leveraging AI to make themselves faster, better to understand.
Are you telling me, Chris, that the information I put into a chat like a Chat GPT bot is being used in other searches?
Oh.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, yeah. I mean, they even have it as a checkbox. So
we've all seen the leaks, right? Of like people who who put a prompt in and get someone else's information or someone's personal information. So it's that's pretty interesting. So we're gonna throw out the next poll where we're gonna ask like how comfortable are you with using AI right now, right? Like we always get, especially when we have co-pilot discussions, right, with partners at Sherweb. There's some people who are gung ho, like they want to adopt it now. They want it. They don't care about the security risks. They want it because it's a new tool and they see the benefits of using it. And you have other ones who are more reserved, right? They want to take their time. They want to understand. They want to put the right guidelines and guardrails in place, right, Chris? So like, what's your take on adopting AI?
I mean, I've talked to practitioners, CISOs. I'll just say CISOs for right now, and I've heard there are CISOs who would want their whole entire environment automated, 100%. Like they're like, I don't care. I want the tools to do everything for me. And I'm like, wow, you have a lot of faith into tools. I personally don't. I'm pretty high on the faith, but I wouldn't say 100% letting the tool do everything, so to speak. I think that's why automation only goes so far for organizations today. Like the average customer I talk to, and this is large enterprises, it's a SMB, like their automation is usually in the 8 to 10% of all their operations. Most of it's still manual, and unless they're leveraging a tool that's automatically doing things for them. Now, I can say that I think automation will get better because of the statement I just made. I think generative AI is going to push that needle forward. And I really do believe that generative AI or AI in general is where you have to be cutting edge in order to prevent things. For example, like I mentioned earlier, we were able to prevent attacks that we didn't even fully know, but because of the anomalies, we were able to prevent it and provide like, hey, this is malicious and block it before it could cause damage to a wide scale. So I can't say you shouldn't leverage AI, but understanding like how they handle information, is there proprietary concerns? Does it require cloud connectivity? Is it a DMZ? Like there's so many different levels you can go of understanding. And I can tell you, for example, SentinelOne, our AI is on the agent itself. Generative AI obviously is ran on the cloud itself. Like there's certain things to understand, like if I'm leveraging this technology, what is it collecting? How are they storing it? Is it meeting my regulations and my risk assessment? And that's what I should go forward in leveraging. But you will see a difference leveraging an AI solution versus a legacy solution for sure.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing is like strike a balance, right? Like find where you're at, find your comfortable areas, and kind of branch out, right? Like do more automation, do more add AI where you find it to be acceptable or commonplace, right? And I think that's the question. So we talked a lot about threat hunting, and I don't think we're ever going to get to a place, right, Chris, where it's like we're sitting in a glass bubble and we're watching a defensive and offensive AI like fight, right? I don't think we're there yet. So how do you keep that human piece in there, right? Like how do you keep the human side? Because I always say like part of my hesitation with AI is we tend to use it to replace human thought when it should be a supplement of human thought, right? Like to help us better understand data and better understand the information that's out there that's hard to parse manually. So how do you keep the human piece in like threat hunting or AI usage?
Yeah, I mean, with the human element, there's key things. For example, if I go into that scenario I told you about that CISO, I want everything to be automated. But what if I took on a company and they had legacy applications that ran their business and operations, and it looked malicious because it was so old, it was using old technology, old network traffic, like unencrypted, and it's like, this looks malicious. This is not how we have a policy and regulations, and just blocked everything. All of a sudden, that line of business is now blocked. That's the human element typically comes in and says, hey, this is actually, unfortunately by design, and I know that based on my education and feelings, it's not appropriate, but we took our risk assessment and allowed it. And that's why we can adopt our AI model, so to speak, or our agent or whatever, to say this is whitelisted, we understand the risk. And that's exactly what you're doing when you do that. Like, I understand the risk, I'm going in that direction. The human element is a huge part of the equation. Even when I mentioned earlier, like, we have a bunch of, I've seen multiple examples through the years that even with technology in place, multi-factor authentication, encryption, AI technology, like on your box, the most modern Exchange server, Google, or whatever, and it's unfortunately phishing still gets in and prevents it. The human element is being, that's why it's so important to educate and have a cyber-centric focus for your organization and say, hey, this is something I need to be cognizant of. This looks kind of weird. It smells kind of weird. Let's report it. Hopefully not everything, but that's exactly what you should be educating for your employees. And that's why I'm a huge advocate of, it should be a top-down approach, like your board to executive level to the owners of the company. It doesn't really matter. They should be encouraging cybersecurity focus or just security best practices. And that way everyone is kind of on board and be rewarded through it. Like, I love seeing the reward systems that come out. Heck, it could be someone gets a little bit extra for a bonus, or someone gets a gift at the end of the year, something, and it makes people excited and they want to participate. And that's why I really enjoy the human element when it comes to cybersecurity initiatives. I have seen the punishment approach too, but it's
carrot or stick, right? Like carrot
Yeah.
or stick. Where are you going? I prefer the carrot method myself, but sometimes the stick is needed. But I like to say this too, like when we were going through our automation and I guess AI journey a little bit on the MSP side, while we were focused on like efficiencies, I think the other side is like, how can we improve like quality of life for the people, for the humans on our help desk, right? And we always ask the question every quarter when our automation team would meet together and say, okay, we'd always ask like, okay, what's taking the most time that we can automate? And then the second question is, what sucks? What do we hate doing, and how can we make it better for the humans on our team? So like, so Chris, I'm going to ask you, like, so what sucks in threat hunting that like AI could take over? Because we the other piece of this too is like, we know there's a shortage of qualified cybersecurity professionals, and we're helping build that next generation. But in the meantime, what sucks that AI could take over and help us like improve on that talent shortage, I guess, a little bit.
I think the main part is just making like actually understanding things. I don't know if anyone's actually looked at API libraries or mass amounts of data, 40 to 100 different tools. You just kind of get burned out. You're like, I'm not a master of everything. You become a generalist like myself. I can say I'm pretty good, but I don't know like how the bread was made, for example, on each application, and I can explain it as if it's my first, born child. But the main challenge I always say is like, that's where generative AI is coming in. It's going to say like, hey, based on the following information or based on what I hear, take it with as much grain of salt as you want. Like, is this like 80-90% truth? I feel like it's the right direction. Validate it, and that moves me forward and makes me feel more confident. One of my favorite features for generative AI today is, I still use it on a regular basis, is summarizing a blog or email or a chain or whatever, being like as long if it's a public information, I'll just say summarize this in 5 bullet points and explain to me what I need to get out of this conversation. And it's exactly what they're trying to do for you here, is push the needle forward, make you look at information faster and feel more confident before you move forward and waste your time on incidents.
Like, and we talk about like burnout, right, in the industry. We talk about burnout on cybersecurity
totally
world. Like, you get overwhelmed with alerts and warnings. And from someone who used to do alert calming after we'd onboard a new tool, right? Like, it sucks. I can't imagine like having to deal with the amount of alerts without any kind of alert tuning. But can AI help in alert tuning and just making sure that the real issues get to the humans on your SOC or your managed help desk, right?
Yeah, and that's where the direction is going. I would say with most generative AI or AI tools that are coming out here, usually they're informing you, and then the next part is automation. That's exactly the direction SentinelOne is going. So we already are informing our customers. We want to take it to the next level, saying, here's things you can do to take action on it, much more so. Like, we already have the action for mitigation or response, but we want to enrich it even more with suggestions of a generative AI saying, hey, this is the incident. You could do this going forward, or here's some suggestions of improvement. And that's where it's really pushing that needle forward. Like, oh, I didn't know I can even do that. I didn't know that tool very well. I need to implement the security policy to prevent this from happening again, so to speak. Simple example.
Yeah, and I see Matt's joined. I'm gonna have one more question that just popped into my head for you, Chris. Like,
sure.
And it was from a question I had pre-written for this, but also a question that popped into the chat for us. And one person said, like, they're getting into cybersecurity and they want to be experts like us, which I'll put experts in quote, right? Like I'm not by any way a cybersecurity professional or expert or guru, right? But like, how do we train the next generation of security professionals, right? To come into the space, to be ready to go, and to keep that love for cybersecurity.
I mean, it depends on what you want to do. I usually will recommend.
It's a big world, right?
Yeah,
cybersecurity is a humongous term, but
it's hard to get into the cybersecurity industry. It's there, even though the demand is high. Usually, everyone wants experts already, and that's the one challenge you're going to run into. So, unfortunately, if you had some kind of certification or background, it does help. It does help a lot. Like if you have a CISSP, that's usually what I recommend people. If you have the time, you want to transition, and if you get through the CISSP certification, you deserve to be in the cybersecurity space. In my personal opinion, it's hard enough as it is. So that's usually my stepping stone for people. Sometimes you can, like myself, like I joined Microsoft. It's kind of hard. They were becoming very Microsoft security focused at that time, even though they're having their own security problems at this moment in time. And I joined the cybersecurity initiatives because of my own personal background of being the master of all in a way. So everyone has their own journey, and that's why I like to talk about mine. I did not start in cybersecurity, but I've been in cybersecurity for over 10 years now. So
yeah, I didn't either, right? So I my first, like, I didn't know I was doing it at the time, but like working for a CPA, I was doing risk management the whole time, and then I get into the MSP space, and I realized we had a lack of risk management when it came to cybersecurity, right? Understanding our clients' in and outs, and it's as simple as understanding like the business, their functions, what's the risk to those functions, and how do we help protect revenue, right? Like, so if you, like I always tell people too, if you want to get into the technical side of things, is something that I started doing. Is like you get tools like Hack the Box and some of the other ones that are out there that let you do some hands-on in a controlled environment, like these actual attacks, so you understand some of these attack chains. But like good risk management, or like even learning how to like have a conversation with people so that you can relay information to. I find that's a skill that's lacking a lot. Like we're very technical, we understand it, but like relating that to another human's tough too. So I think it depends, right? Like where do you want to go? And you want to go into offensive security, defensive? Do you want to go into like management and do CISO? Do you want to do health related data management? Do you want to do API protection?
There's so many.
Do you want to do vulnerability? I was like, you start going down that list, and it's huge. Yeah. And Matt's about to pull the hook out on us, I think. So
no, I know you two could go back and forth for hours on this, and we all appreciate it. It's all great stuff. But we are just over the 45-minute mark. I wanted to just jump in. I know we got one final poll question we'll throw up there right now for everybody that's still on the call. While we wrap up, kind of final thoughts. Again, we appreciate both Roddy and Chris. This was very, very insightful. Hopefully everybody on the call feels like they gained some wisdom as well, or at least exploring some new thoughts and ideas, right? As you go through this. The webinar itself is recorded, so for those of you who want to go back and rewatch, or have any of your team watch it as well, it will be available. I believe it'll get sent out, and if not, I know it'll be on Sherweb's YouTube, and also on our website. We've got a webinar section as well. Again, we appreciate everybody's time. I did see the questions here. I think we already went through some of them. And one final piece, I don't know if Roddy, I know we still got this pull up, and if you want to throw that last screen on, just to kind of, what I mentioned at the beginning for everybody that's still in the call. If any of you do have more questions, if you want to do a deeper dive into SentinelOne as a product in general, what is it, right? What does it look like with Sherweb? Or just maybe you're already using SentinelOne and you're a Sherweb partner and didn't realize that Sherweb carried SentinelOne, right? If you want to have a conversation of what does it look like to bring your SentinelOne over to your Sherweb account, that's something that we've been doing since day one of this launch. The screen Roddy did have up there a little bit of information. So I would say, reach out to your account manager if you are a Sherweb partner already. If you're interested in becoming a Sherweb partner, that link, I don't know if Roddy, there you go, that screen there. Feel free to reach out to that. My email is on there as well. If you want to go through, I do a lot of different conversations with our partners. It could be a general security consultation if you guys want to peel back the layers, see what what you're missing at a lot of these topics that Chris and Roddy talked about today. If you want to dive in on SentinelOne specifically, we can set you up with a demo. We've got NFRs, we've got trials available. So please feel free to reach out to myself, reach out to your account managers. Let's have a conversation. And if anything, hopefully today you gained a little bit of insight and maybe have some more questions and are looking to do some deeper dives. That's the goal of this. We want to provide that value there. I don't know if we have any more questions. I'm taking a peek. I think we have answered them all. Roddy, Chris, even though I'm scared to ask, but any final thoughts that you guys want to leave our viewers with today?
I'll go first. I'll let Chris have the last word. I'm going to give Chris the final blow, I guess. No, the thing I want to impress on people about is we talk a lot about AI and there's some uncertainty about how AI plays a role, but don't be scared of it. If you ever heard my conversation, Matt knows this too. I go really deep sometimes into the use of AI and issues with it, but at the same point, it's here, it's not going anywhere. You have to learn to adapt to it, to use it, to put some governance in place around it, and build out your use cases for it, and protect those use cases with good security practices. So I know there is a lot of concerns out there. I'm not gonna belittle that, but at the same point, we're not putting, as my buddies say, we're not putting that smoke back in the capacitor, right? We're not putting that genie back in the bottle. And we're gonna see more and more companies, like Chris said, if you're a private equity firm and you're investing in a company and you're not using AI in your product, that's a huge negative. So we're gonna see that adoption of AI into a lot more products, and we have to learn how to use it responsibly and use it in a society, I guess, a socially acceptable manner too, right? But Chris, I'll leave you with the last words.
I'm going to second everything you just said. I really encourage you just to go out and trial, test things out, and look at it. This is not just going to influence cybersecurity. This is influencing our world. You can look up the Biden administration EU AI Act. There's the EU AI Act. There is frameworks and organizations being designed to implement security measures when it comes to AI. So this is not going away. They just don't want the robots to take over, so to speak. So the main thing is okay, well, if I'm looking at it, I need to educate myself, be prepared. That's the main thing I would say. If there's anything you can get out of this webinar, is do a little research, familiarize yourself, ask the right questions. You can ask the AI bots whatever questions you want to, but you can still talk to your peers, just like us on here, and say, what do you know? What's things I need to consider? And here's a challenge I'm running into. And could I even leverage generative AI? And how are you guys leveraging it? Customers love it. Ask me that. I've worked with multiple companies that started jumping on their own generative AI bandwagon of understanding, we're offering this to our customers. How can we do that? So I think the evolution is already been going. We are an early adopter company, by the way. That's okay to not say hey, we should have started a year and a half ago, like SentinelOne did with generative AI specifically, but just start leveraging AI and start doing your own research is what I would really say out of this.
And we did just get one last question that came through. I don't know if we'll have time to unpack it completely right now, but it's from Chris Howells, and he asked, after seeing a co-pilot attack, by it implementing itself as the new HR director, how do I convince my client to trust AI to combat AI? So that's the question of the day for sure.
I guess that's a trust thing, right? How do you trust people after you've been burned too, right? You've had some bad hires and you've been burned. So how do you regain trust? And I think you have to. I'll start off, and maybe Chris, you can expound on it. But you have to understand that where did they falter at in their implementation? Were they not following a framework? Did they not put good governance in place? Did they not have basic practices like Microsoft best practices like MFA and conditional access policies and things like that? How did they get burned? And let them understand that AI is only as good as the people who implemented it, and if you can do a better job implementing it. And it's, I go back to some of the training I got from the series is called The Compassionate Geek, and I'm going to blank on the guy's name, but it's Don Crowley, I think is the guy's name. But he talks about you got to build up some goodwill there, right? You got to put some goodwill in the goodwill bank, and then go from there. But trust as much as it is a fault of human beings, I sometimes find it's also one of the most important core values you can have with one of your clients. So rebuild that trust, understand how the incident happened, give them some reassurances by putting some good practices in place, and then we can try again later. I wouldn't force it. I wouldn't be like, you have to do this now. I would build that trust up first. Chris?
I mean, go ahead, Matt.
I was just going to say, since I know we're almost at time, one last thing I'll throw there, just from a sales side of things for you there, Chris, on that question. I encourage you, reach out to your account manager, myself, because we can unpack a little bit more these topics. And what Roddy was talking about, the trust aspect, it's the storytelling, right? When you're talking to your clients and we're talking about the risk versus reward, it's a slightly different conversation, but one of the things we can help you unpack is, well, how do tools like SentinelOne, like how do the specific features and functions help you to build that trust, right? Like setting up a trial and going 30 days and actually unpacking some of those reports of, threats that have actually actively been hunted and caught. It'll help guide you with those conversations, and again, establish that trust and get over the hump, so to say. So again, I encourage you, reach out to myself, your account manager, and we can really unpack the sales and marketing aspect as well, and how the tools are utilized to help you have those conversations.
My feedback here for the people who are having concern with AI, I mean, think about it from, I'm showing age, like when the first 3 Apple phone came out, and you're like, oh, well, I have my Palm, I have my flip phones, it's a phone. Like, what else do I need it for? And it was very scary at that time. It felt very expensive. It didn't seem necessary. The phone still did its job, but look at how society is today. Everyone has a smartphone, and everyone competes for the fastest, best smartphone out there. It's kind of in that same bandwagon right now. People are starting to dip into that smartphone market, and all of a sudden, everyone's going to be in that smartphone market. Understanding the risk assessment, there's no challenge about it. That's not new. This has been going on for quite some time. I've even mentioned already, like, assume breach. If they got in and they compromise everything just by faking themselves, leveraging generative AI, I think you have other problems. I would say you need to go into a risk assessment and understand, like, if someone gets in, what do they have access to? And that's something that I would maybe concentrate as a business professional, saying AI is very cool, but we first need to fix the problem here before we implement further securities. You could throw everything at it, but if you don't have the right risk assessment and configurations and implications of your privacy measures, it's going to make it harder for you as an organization. And of course, then they're going to be freaking out, like, well, they got everything. Yeah, that's a little scary. And that's where I recommend reaching out to these guys and say, hey, how can we fix this and make this a little better? So,
yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. Well, I think we're just about at the hour mark, a little bit over. Again, Chris, thank you very much. Roddy, appreciate both of your time today. All of our attendees, viewers, thank you for taking the time to chat, hang out. Hopefully this was insightful. This was valuable. Again, reach out, any questions. You want to get on a call, set up a demo for SentinelOne. If you're not a Sherweb partner, want to explore that as well, reach out. Let's have some conversations, and this will be recorded, so if you need to go back. So again, thank you for everybody. I think we are just about good. We'll wrap up, and we hope to chat more soon.
Yeah. Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it, brother.
Thanks, everyone.
Of course.